The serpent tattoo wrapped around Lena Brooks's forearm was easy to miss if you weren't looking. Faded black ink, uneven lines, the kind of design that seemed like a mistake made in a drunken weekend. At Camp Pendleton, new recruits never failed to notice it, and they always laughed. "Garage special," they'd joke. "Looks like it was done with a pen." Lena never reacted. She kept her head down, her hands buried in the guts of whatever Humvee or transport had limped into the motor pool that day. To most, she was simply the quiet mechanic. Steady, competent, grease-stained, but reliable. The woman who could tell what was wrong with an engine just by listening to it. What they didn't know, what nobody here suspected, was that Lena Brooks had once lived another life entirely. Before tools and engines, she had belonged to Unit Meridian, a covert team assembled to handle missions too sensitive for anyone else. Officially, Meridian didn't exist, and unofficially, only 6 of them had survived its last operation. The tattoo wasn't decoration, it was their mark. Private Rodriguez was the first to mock it openly. Barely out of boot camp, still glowing with cocky confidence, he spotted it while she leaned under the hood of his transport. "Nice ink, Brooks," he said with a smirk. "Lose a bet? Looks like someone scratched it on in the dark." The recruits around him laughed. Lena's expression never changed. "It's functional," she said flatly. "Functional? What, does it help you fix trucks?" More laughter. Before it could grow, Sergeant Patterson's bark cut through. "Rodriguez, less time mocking tattoos, more time learning not to wreck equipment you barely know how to use." The recruits scattered. Lena dipped her head back into the engine, offering nothing more than a faint nod of thanks Patterson was sharp enough to catch. She endured the whispers for months, letting them think it was meaningless. Better they believe it was a bad tattoo than recognize it for what it was, a symbol of a unit erased from history. Then Colonel Vincent Nash arrived. He came with the usual stir of a new commanding officer, a career Marine with an impeccable record, fresh off a decorated Pacific tour. Tall, lean, gray at the temples, he carried himself like a man who had seen more than he'd ever say aloud. His second week, he toured the motor pool. Patterson and the team had scrubbed every corner, every log perfect. Lena was halfway under a truck, arms deep in a stubborn transmission, when Nash stopped beside her. For a moment, silence. Then his gaze fixed on her forearm. He froze. The inspection halted. His expression shifted. The practiced neutrality of an officer cracking into something sharper. Recognition. "That's Brooks, sir," Patterson said quickly, filling the silence. "Best mechanic I've got. Can diagnose anything." Nash didn't answer. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped closer. His eyes never left the tattoo. "Brooks," he said, voice controlled, "step out from under there." She obeyed, sliding free, wiping grease from her hands, standing at attention. Their eyes met. For a fraction of a second, recognition passed between them, not of names, but of lives lived in shadows. The motor pool grew quiet. Nash removed his jacket, then tugged off his undershirt. Gasps rippled across the room. On his left shoulder, faded but unmistakable, was the same serpent coiled around a compass rose. Lena's chest tightened. Nash's voice was quiet, but every syllable carried weight. "She's not logistics," he said. "She's former Unit Meridian. Only 6 of us made it out." The silence that followed was absolute. Lena's carefully built cover had just shattered. The order came later that day, building 47 30 minutes alone. Inside, the second-floor conference room was windowless and quiet. Nash was already there. No uniform this time. Plain clothes, sleeves rolled up. the serpent tattoo visible on his shoulder. He didn't waste time. "Close the door." She did. They sat across from each other at the narrow table. For a long moment, silence pressed between them. Not awkward, silence recognition, the kind that belonged only to people who had survived the same ghosts. Finally, Nash spoke. "I thought you were dead." "Officially, I am," Lena said, her tone flat. "Brooks is just a mechanic. The woman you knew died when Meridian burned." His eyes hardened. "Walker and Chen?" She nodded. The memory flickered sharp. Gunfire echoing off canyon walls, the smell of burning fuel, dragging a body heavier than her own strength through impossible terrain. "After Germany, you vanished," Nash said. "I tried to track everyone. You disappeared off-grid." "I was given a choice," Lena replied. "Reassignment or something more permanent. I chose obscurity." Nash's mouth tightened. "Same choice I had." He leaned forward. "But my reassignment came with strings. My orders were to keep track of the survivors. Watch. Report. Make sure none of us slipped." "Monitor," she said evenly. He didn't deny it. "But lately, it's more than that. Someone else has been asking questions, not the Corps." External Lena's expression didn't change, but she felt her chest tighten. "Who?" "We don't know. The chatter started 6 months ago. Data pulls, surveillance anomalies, patterns too deliberate to ignore. Someone is building files on us. Detailed files." He slid a folder across the table. Lena opened it slowly. Her own name stared back at her, tied to pages of routine. Motor pool hours, living quarters, eating times. The precision was clinical. Her jaw set. "They know everything." Nash nodded grimly. "Harper at Fort Bragg is already under watch. Jackson in Germany, too. Whoever's doing this isn't guessing. They have inside access, information that should be impossible to get." She closed the folder. "So either a foreign service or a leak inside our own walls." "Exactly." Nash's voice lowered. "And if it's internal, you know what that means." Lena looked him in the eye. "It means they're tying off loose ends." The room grew heavy with the weight of it. Both of them knew what that phrase meant in their world. Nash finally said, "If it escalates, protective measures won't be enough. We'll have to act the way we used to." "You're talking about reactivation," she said. "I'm talking about survival." By morning, she couldn't turn it off. Her gaze mapped escape routes, calculated choke points, inventoried tools that could serve as weapons. She moved like she had years ago, scanning, measuring, anticipating. The mechanic was fading. The operative was waking. Confirmation came at lunch. She sat alone in the cafeteria, back against the wall, watching without seeming to. That's when she saw him. Civilian clothes, posture too precise, haircut too sharp. He ate like he belonged, but his eyes gave him away. Trained, watching her, and he wasn't alone. A second man entered minutes later, taking a seat that gave him a line of sight across the room. Cross coverage, standard surveillance. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with readiness. She stood, disposed of her tray, and left without hurry. In the glass door's reflection, she saw one of them raise a phone to his mouth. Her cover was gone. Back at the motor pool, Patterson intercepted her. His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. "Colonel Nash wants to see you. Now, something about maintenance procedures." The phrase was code, urgent. Lena gave a small nod, masking the rush of adrenaline that surged like an old, familiar tide. The grease-stained mechanic had lasted 2 years. But the shadows were back, and with them, the woman she had once been. Nash was waiting with more than questions. The narrow table between them was stacked with folders, their red seals unmistakable. He pushed one toward her. "Read!" Lena opened it, keeping her face neutral. Inside, neatly printed dossiers detailed more than she wanted to see. Her cover identity, her living quarters, her schedule down to the minute, even the time she tended to sit in the cafeteria. She turned a page. Jackson, Germany. Photographs of his apartment building, routes to and from base, grainy shots of him crossing a street. Another page, Harper, Fort Bragg, monitored on his runs, his grocery trips, his mailbox. Every survivor of Meridian, exposed. "This isn't reconnaissance, it's targeting," she said. "Exactly," Nash said. "Whoever's behind this isn't just curious, they're preparing." "State actor?" "Possibly, but the patterns don't fit cleanly. Could be foreign, could be private or internal." "Cleaning house," Lena muttered. Nash didn't argue. "And if that's the case, waiting will get us killed." Her voice was steady. "Then we stop waiting." The secure facility beneath headquarters became her new ground. Screens tracked hostile cells across continents, operators in Berlin, surveillance in Seoul, movement through ports in South America. Whoever was orchestrating this had global reach, but their mistake was simple. They thought Meridian was gone. Lena studied the boards late into the night. The data was precise, frightening in its scope, but also flawed. Patterns emerged, predictable rotations, channels of communication that looked efficient but left signatures too regular. She leaned over the table, eyes narrowing. "They built a net, but nets work both ways." Nash nodded. "Exactly. And no one hunts better than Meridian." For Lena, the shift was seamless. 2 years of pretending to be someone else fell away like a mask. She rose early, trained hard, reacquainted herself with skills she had buried: close quarters, evasion drills, weapons. The movements came back easily, not like something learned, but like something remembered. At night, she returned to the files. Faces stared back at her. Harper, Jackson, the others scattered across the world, unaware how close the threat had come. She traced their photographs with her fingers, each one a tether pulling her back into the circle she had once tried to escape. The serpent and compass inked on her arm no longer felt like a burden. It was a bond, a promise. The first direct confirmation came 3 nights later. Surveillance caught a hostile pair shadowing Nash's residence off base. They were disciplined, equipped, using tradecraft that marked them as professionals. But they made a mistake. A signal relayed too soon, a vehicle circling twice. The analysts flagged it instantly. Nash watched the footage with cold eyes. "They're probing, testing response times." Lena didn't hesitate. "Then let's answer." It wasn't anger in her tone, it was clarity. Preparations moved quickly. Counter-surveillance routes were plotted, decoys arranged, digital noise pumped into networks to muddy the enemy's feeds. For every probe, Meridian placed a shadow. For every watcher, they planted an echo. Lena slipped into the rhythm easily. Moving at dawn through quiet corridors, she felt the familiar hum under her skin, anticipation before impact, the silent energy of missions about to unfold. The grease-stained days of the motor pool felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else. She knew now they had always belonged to someone else. On her bunk one night, Lena stared at the tattoo. She remembered the night it was inked. In a dim room, half-drunk laughter, 6 of them gritting teeth against the needle, binding themselves with a mark that meant nothing to outsiders and everything to them. 3 of those faces were gone, the rest scattered, hunted, and yet here it was, pulling her back to the same truth. Survival wasn't an accident. It was a choice. She whispered it aloud to no one. Meridian lives. At dawn, the base carried on like always. Recruits ran drills, engines roared, boots struck pavement in steady rhythm. On the surface, nothing had changed, but beneath, everything was different. In the secure facility, Lena stood beside Nash, watching the screens flicker with data, movement, chatter. Targets forming, patterns emerging, a hunt unfolding. Nash glanced at her. "You ready?" She didn't need to answer. The mechanic was gone. The operative remained. The serpent on her arm wasn't a joke. It wasn't forgotten history. It was a signal. To her, to Nash, to anyone foolish enough to come after them. Unit Meridian was back. And this time, Lena Brooks was done hiding.